The one thing that I'm really excited about is having Adam on here, the platform you've done with Rising Coaches, giving us coaches an opportunity to grow. I think it's super important. The other thing with Coach Huff, man, just to being an Atlanta guy, I just love what you've done. I love the things that you've had an opportunity to do in Atlanta. As an Atlanta guy playing for my dad at Lithonia High School, all the coaches there I grew up with, you guys are affecting change, man. And I know my pops will be proud of you and all the things you're doing in Atlanta. So I just love that you have a heart for this. And going to my dad in Atlanta, I will say this is something that's super important for me. My dad left a legacy. He passed about 3 years ago. Coached at Lithonia High School and Martin Luther King High School in Atlanta. And then coaching in Atlanta, the one thing that was super important to him was impacting lives. At his funeral, there's hundreds and hundreds of coaches that were there, and hundreds of players that he coached and didn't coach. They didn't talk about the wins, the championships. They talked about the impact he had on their life. They talked about the different things that he did. They talked about the different things that he did, the things that he stood for, getting them out of a pinch, helping them get a job. You guys will hear me say this a lot about impacting lives over anything else. As coaches, we have opportunity to impact more than we have to get a transaction from a kid. I think the ability to impact our players to transform their lives is something that's greater than any win that we can get. I know that my dad, the biggest thing for him was the impact. If you think about it as a coach, think about Coach Huff, the coaches in Atlanta, these high school coaches, you are in communities. These young men look to you as a mentor. They look to you as a leader. As a leader, these parents look to you to give you the keys to their sons and their daughters to say, hey, train him up to be a man like you. And I can just remember waking up as a 10 or 11-year-old and having a size 13 Jordans downstairs. And I'm wondering what's going on. And my mom telling me my dad having to take in a player because he's in a terrible situation, a terrible background. And the impact he had on that young man's life was greater than him getting a bucket. Coach Riley mentioned it before. You can be a transactional coach where you do whatever it takes to get what you got to get out of that player. Or you can be a transformational coach where the goal is to transform young people's lives. As a coach, you have the ability to put tools in their backpack. Each coach, when they leave your program, you're equipping them to go on their journey for life. You're giving them all the nuggets and the things they need to survive in life. Obviously, as a man of strong faith, those nuggets, scriptures, word of God, in the Black community growing up, the church was the pillar for the community during the civil rights. Growing up in Atlanta, those stories that we talk about, the education you guys are talking about in books, they weren't stories to me. That was real life. That's my dad telling me about growing up in Albany, Georgia, Valdosta, Georgia, South Georgia. That's me as a high school kid in Stone Mountain, Georgia, walking around seeing the KKK. That's in '96, seeing the KKK as a high school kid. And for me, that's reality. But the only way you can be equipped to handle the things that are happening, even what's happening today, is if as coaches, we are built to transform our young people's lives. We're putting the tools in the backpack for their journey. So when this comes up, they're not only equipped to change the world, to effect change, but they're actually going to you for those next steps. As a mentor, as a discipler, as they say in the Christian faith, you disciple. You want people to follow you as you're following God. You want people to follow you as you're following something that is affecting change. And so for me as a coach, I think we have a great opportunity to affect change with our players. Think about it. We recruit kids from all across the country. Whether it's an inner city kid in Atlanta or a kid from Dallas, or if we're in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin, you're in the living room, you're with those parents, you're with that kid, and they are giving you their son. And so as a coach, if you're about transforming their life, you will give them the tools about racism, about social injustice, about the things that are going to happen in life that they would never, ever know. And then that affects change from where we're going. I'll give you 3 things that I think are really cool: love, hope, and direction. I mentioned this before. For me, I coach to impact lives and to build strong relationships with our players. When you build it's not really hard right now to have the really, really tough conversations to guide your players when you're transforming their lives, because those players know you, they trust you, and you're authentic with them. For me, that's what my dad did. That's the only thing that I know. I don't want to teach a guy how to get a bucket. I want to teach a guy how to navigate through life when tough times are tough and hard. And I'll end on this. Willis Wilson was my coach in college. He's on this call. Vince Walton worked with me. He'll talk later. We were on life together. Coach Wilson was a mentor and a father figure like my dad. So for me, these things that we're talking about as coaches are sometimes really hard right now. Some coaches are they're struggling to put rules and regulations in place because they don't have the relationships. You build strong relationships with your players to really, really, really impact them in a way where they want to know the truth. Coach Wilson told me how to be a man of God. He told me, what do you do? How do you as a black man get $1 million in your bank account? You know, how do you start a bank account? How do you fight injustices? How do you love? How do you provide hope to your players, which he provided hope for me like my dad did. And last, he gave me direction. In Proverbs, it says, our people are unrestrained because they don't have direction. We are unrestrained and out of control when we don't have direction. So the young people that are entrusted us to not only help them get to college and get to the next level, to get them a job, to be a husband, to be a father, they've entrusted us to give them the direction and the tools that they need so that when times like this hit, we can affect change. And so I'm just thankful and blessed that I'm on this call. Again, for me, it's all about encouraging, showing the love to our players, building strong relationships. It's about providing hope for our players, because right now there's no hope, man. I'm just telling you, it's hard. When you live this life and this is your reality for racism, it's hard to have hope. And then the last thing, man, we got to get direction, yo. Like direction of where to go. And so I just love you guys. I appreciate it. It's an awesome platform. And I'm just thankful for the men that impacted me. And as a coach, I want to make sure I'm impacting my players on a local, on a relationship level, more so than anything else.
This has actually been probably the best 2 hours for me, just learning and listening. I think that's why I'm on here, is just to get educated. I definitely don't have the answers, like Ross said, but I'm on here to learn more than anything. I think that's the biggest thing that I can do in my position right now, is just to get educated and before I speak on any of these topics, because a lot of things have hit me in the last 2 hours. Going back to Ryan Price, who's one of the first guys to talk, and he said that he needs our help with the Black Lives Matter. And that really hit me, man, because I'm sitting here looking at this screen and it keeps changing on me. But I look at Coach Wilson and Coach Price, two guys that when I first got in this league and didn't have a clue what I was doing, they took me in, and they've been incredible mentors for me in the Southland Conference. Just friendship, and it hasn't just been wins and losses. And I've got obviously a lot of regrets that our conversations haven't gone further, and we haven't dug into some of these deeper topics. And maybe now, obviously, I think those conversations will change. But obviously, what those guys have done for me, and then I look at Richie Riley, who was a great friend of mine when he was at Nichols, and still a guy that I talk to and have a ton of respect for. And I saw Nelson Haggerty on here from back in our Lone Star days. Was a hell of a coach at Midwestern, did a hell of a job, and was a great friend of mine. I grew up in Wichita Falls, so got the chance to go back and see him. And then I saw old school Chuck Taylor, and Chuck was I know he's been so good to so many people on this panel, and he's been that way for me too. So I know there's a lot of more guys on this panel, but I guess that's where a lot of guilt is. When Ryan said that, man, it's just like, what can I do to help? And I think that's where this thing is really good for me, is to sit here and listen to the conversation and get educated. On the education part, I think where I've felt guilt over the last 2 hours is I tell moms and dads the same thing you guys do, that we're going to take care of them and turn them in from boys to men. But I don't know if I've done that with my black student athletes. I'm at a majority white campus at Abilene Christian. And I don't know if I know I haven't done a good job of maybe when they left me, of teaching them what the real world's going to be like. And I'm not going to make excuses anymore on that. I'm going to educate myself so we can have deeper and broader conversations that I'm knowledgeable about. And then I'm going to listen to them, and I'm going to have their back, and I'm going to support them. But I think that's definitely something that I can grow as a head coach, just listening to the last 2 hours is on that topic. I think education is the most important thing for me. I'm excited at Abilene Christian. I don't know the complete dynamics of what it's going to look like, but we had our first rally about 2 weeks ago, which was great on our campus. I had the opportunity to attend and listen to some speakers, and we're also going to make, I think it's, don't hold me to this, I think it's all incoming freshmen. It might be all students from now on are going to be required to take an African-American history class. And so I'm excited about that and the change that's going on our campus. And I know it's just baby steps, but it's growth, and it's something that wasn't happening a month ago. And again, the education piece is important for, I know, our campus, but also me. I think one thing on the conversation, uncomfortable conversations with a white man, that first one, I actually saw one, I guess it might have been part 2 or part 3 that he did with the family in Waco. And one thing that hit me on that was he talked about he did mission work in Nigeria. He does it all summer. And some of you guys might have heard this already, but he said he was taking a woman in to get glasses because she couldn't see. And the woman was fighting him, saying she could see fine. He finally gets her in there after 30 minutes. And she gets glasses on, and she comes out and she sees the world in a completely different manner, in a completely different way. And I think that's what we have to do as white people and as white coaches. We have to put glasses on because we don't know. I didn't live that life, and I don't understand that life. And I'm not going to sit up here and pound my chest like I do know that life, because I don't. And what I have to do is, again, get educated and see the world from a different set of glasses. I think I've always been quiet. I've never been vocal on things because I wasn't growing around racism. I know there was racism around me at times, but it wasn't me. It wasn't how I raised my family, or we don't allow it in our locker room. But staying silent, that ain't going to work anymore. You know, I have the opportunity and a platform now to be vocal and to help people that have helped me tremendously in this business. And so I'm embracing it. Obviously a little scared about it because I'm not as educated as what I need to be on certain topics. And so looking forward to continue to get educated and continue to educate our guys. The last thing I'll say is I know we asked I think it was Tyler about our kids. I've got a 14-year-old son right now, so I'm starting to, get with him and educate him a little bit on what's going on. And obviously he's got a lot of questions right now. And we started that study on Martin Luther King. I think that's the best way that I knew to start the conversation. And one quote that really hit me from Martin Luther King when going over this with my son was, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." And I think that's my job now as a white coach and a majority African-American, as far as our players, is to not stand in comfort anymore and convenient just because I'm comfortable and I'm privileged. I've got to fight for my players and fight for other coaches here, other black coaches in our business to continue to move up and do things. So looking forward to the next hour or so. I'm missing my son's 11-year-old birthday party. We had a night swim party night from 11 to 8 to 11:30, and I told my wife I'd be there by 10:30. And it doesn't look like that's going to happen, but he'll have a lot more birthdays. I just hope I still have my wife. Question for you, Omar, is we both work at a Christian university, I guess over the last 3 weeks, I've kind of struggled with not just our university, but some Christians in general, as sometimes we hide behind, the Christianity part and don't get in the fight. It's kind of an easy out for us. With you and I both getting our teams back, and when we have real in-depth conversations face to face, how much will you base that on scripture? And then education-wise, I guess, how much would you base on scripture, and how much would you base on policy?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Coach. I really appreciate it. And I think for me, like, your faith is who you are. You wear it on your sleeve. Either it is real or it's fake, right? I think we've heard this a number of times. Rules without relationship is rebellion. It's the same thing as religion. It's about relationships. I said it before. The impact we can have on our kids and our program, we have to be real and authentic. And if we're not real and authentic, it doesn't matter what education or what policies we try to put in place. And so the question you have is an awesome one, because I think if you're at a Christian university or a faith-based university or public, private, your players are going to know when you're real or if you're just checking the box and putting some education out there. So I do think education-wise, there's definitely some faith-based stuff for me personally that are awesome. White fragility. There's some other things that are some super resources that get back to the heart of the matter, which to me is a heart issue. Racism is evil, is heart. And so obviously love can drive that out. So I think for you, being able to get back to something of the core of who you are as a person, it's not going to matter if you're at a Christian university, a public university, a faith-based university, private, your player's going to know if you're authentic and real or not. And so I would just be very careful for all the coaches on this call to put rules and regulations and things in place that aren't real to you, that aren't authentic. You can put these rules in place, man, but if you're not truly reaching the heart of your players and being authentic of who you really are, and that goes back to the relationship piece, it's not going to matter. The last piece about education, I think, Coach, I know some of the players that you coach and you recruit, you do a great job, man. You're great with relationships. It's really hard for some coaches right now to even put in processes with their players because they know they're fake. They know they're not real. They know they're not building that relationship that I talked about earlier. And so you've done a great job of building equity with your players, with your relationship. The education you give them, they're going to receive. So education-wise, I think there's books, there's movies we talked about. You got to educate it. You don't know what you're talking about unless you know. But there's some real-life education some of these kids need to know. The thing about you being Abilene, you can drive down the road when you guys play all these Dallas and these inner city schools. They need to hear from people who have a different lens than them. They need to hear some truth that's educating them in a way they've never been educated from where they grew up. So that's in your local community. Those are people you recruit. And like I said, Coach Golden, I know you've done a great job where families trust you. You got parents of Black players that trust you. Let the parents educate you. Let your players educate you. I think some of these educational policies we put in place, so we expect these kids to read books, but we don't want to have this dialogue like we're having on this conversation one-on-one. I joked with somebody before. Someone said in quarantine, we got a lot of public proclamations, but we don't got a lot of private conversations. And for you, having private conversations as a leader is something that's super cool. I had the opportunity to do that with my president, with my AD. I know you do the same. Those private conversations, your players are watching, and you can truly educate them, and they can educate you just by listening to them. So I appreciate that, Coach Golden. That's a big time question. I hope that answered it. Answered okay.
No, you did great, and I appreciate it. Look forward to continuing the conversation with you as we move forward and digging into a relationship with you. I think you could help me tremendously here.
Yeah, the question I have for you, I think, and this is more of a tangible thing, because, again, I know relationships are big for you, and just knowing a lot of people that know you do a great job with that with your players. During quarantine as coaches, we kind of had to figure this thing out of how to have deep, intimate conversations with our players, check on them when they're at home through Zoom, right? Like, our players are all gone. How can we possibly have intimate relationship and conversations that are real because of quarantine, right? So how have you as a coach used the methods that from quarantine, when this issue of race came up, to have those authentic relationships, to have those conversations? What are some things you did that made it real with your players versus we all wanted our guys to post on social media and make a statement, but our guys need some reality. They need real talk. So for you, what's some things that you did as a coach when this hit?
Yeah, to give you kind of an inside look at our program and just being completely honest and transparent, relationships are huge in our program. When I was young in this business, when I first got the head coaching opportunity, it was all about wins. I used to set a number, 15 wins, 16, whatever. There was a point in time all we wanted was 5 wins, and then there came a point in time where we started building relationships and really what you guys have talked about tonight on this call is being really completely honest and truthful with one another and getting to know each other for who we really are, not worrying about the basketball as much. And it's amazing what's happened since that's been a big part of our program. The problem with that, with this COVID, is our relationships are face-to-face. We deal with our players every day. We talk to our players about stuff every day besides basketball. And it's been very challenging through this. Probably the most challenging part is that relationship component. We did a Zoom call. Coach Bostic, one of our assistant coaches here, we have Thursday team chapels here. Every Thursday, our team gets together for 30 to 45 minutes and does chapel. And so we picked a Thursday right after the George Floyd was murdered. And Antonio Bostic led it. And I was really nervous about it, to be honest with you, because all of our relationships are so personal, and I wanted to kind of wait on that and have that when it was more face-to-face. I'm new to Zoom, like probably a bunch of us are, and I just didn't know if we'd get the message across that we wanted to. I didn't know which direction it would go. So we brought in a couple African-American mentors on our campus that have a heck of a lot more knowledge than me on this subject, and I let them lead it. And it was probably the best chapel we've ever had in my career here. Our Zoom meetings were averaging about 20 minutes early in the COVID at 2 minutes as we kept going to COVID, and that one went almost 2 hours long. And it was an incredible conversation. We let every one of our players express their feelings, and it was great for me to listen. And my locker room's different than some. As you know, I have a player on my team that was he was raised racist. To just be honest, his family's racist. His friends and where he went to school, and I don't think he played with many black basketball players until he got the opportunity to come to ACU. And 2 years into it, he loves those guys like his own brother. When he's in Abilene, the problem for him is when he goes back home and he's got to listen to his family or he gets on the phone. And so he laid his heart out there, man. And it was hard to hear that. I kind of thought that a little bit, but never really got to that point with him. But for him to bring that up, I think it goes to what Coach Wilson was saying. We're starting to have real conversations, and our team loves him more for that because he was completely transparent and honest about how much he loves his teammates and goes to battle with them. And on the flip side of that, we had a player that was in Houston face to face with a policeman and posted it on Twitter. So it was an incredible Zoom conversation. It was really in depth for me to get to know our guys and where they stand. Again, educational at the same time for me. And I think I was fortunate, Coach. We have 10 upperclassmen right now on our team that have been in our program for 3 or 4 years. So I think the conversation could be more real that way than if you had a bunch of newcomers that didn't really know each other or didn't have a relationship. So I think that our team is going to be real fortunate in that moving forward this year, that we have real relationships, and we've had them for 2, 3, and some 4 years, that I think we can have some real conversations and hopefully some real change, not only on our campus, but in our community, in our locker room, and continue to spread that message and help. So I hope that kind of answered it, but it's been challenging, but it's also been rewarding at the same time.
No, I appreciate it, man. That was big time. I appreciate all you do, man, and how you lead and well, man. Great job.
No, I appreciate you. And one quick thought. I know you guys are tired of me talking, but to what we were talking about, that last question with Kevin, Coach Wilson, I think I can do a much better job, along with all of us that are white head coaches in our businesses, promoting black coaches in our business. I think so many times I got sick of hearing row the boat. I heard row the boat 100 million times when Richie was in the league. But instead of being in a rivalry with Richie and Coach Wilson and Coach Price, and where we were always going at each other about wins and losses, I think one thing we can do is, I know how damn good of a coach Richie is, and I know how good Coach Wilson is, and on this Zoom call, how many great coaches we have. And I think it's our job as white head coaches to promote those guys in our business on a public platform, and not worrying about what we say of how good they are. It's going to hurt us in recruiting. Screw that, man. We have a platform, and we've got to help these guys. And I think that's the biggest thing. Obviously, ADs and presence is important, but I think there's something on our shoulders too, to publicly praise these guys and how good of coaches we have in our business.